The only reason why you would ever fly an aircraft, an unmanned aircraft at night, is if you're looking for something, whether it be a person or back in the 80s and the 90s, when Reagan was dismantling the nuclear program between Soviet Union and the United States, there were 132 of these that had come up missing, and that's not a joke. And you can actually Google the report. Since that time, there have been multitudes of these nuclear warheads that are suitcase-sized warheads that have been recovered, and I think we're around 6 or 7 left that are unaccounted for in the world now. So the gentleman that I was working with was physically in the room with one of these, and he knew that particular asset was heading in this direction.
John Ferguson, thank you for joining us as we are doing this very timely, I guess we'll call it a podcast conversation of the current situation that's happening here in New Jersey and possibly the entire United States. John, you came into the spotlight in early December because you put out a video during the New Jersey drones situation where you decided to be one of the few people who works in the actual drone department.
Now, drones, they have no reason to be in the air at night unless you're doing some type of ISR work, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, looking for bad guys. There's no reason for a drone to be flying at night, really. The only reason why you would ever fly an aircraft, an unmanned aircraft at night, is if you're looking for something, whether it be a person or trying to smell gas.
And you are actually the CEO of your company, Saxon Unmanned Aerospace.
Yeah.
You gave your 2 cents on the situation, and it kind of hit home with a lot of people because that thing got millions and millions of views. And with a high degree of confidence from someone in that space, a lot of people began to be like, all right, I think this is what's going on, because of the situation with the Pentagon, the administration, the government just being deafening. We're hearing nothing. Until to this point, the recording of this, it is today, January 13th, we have still heard about nil about the situation. And the media, surprisingly, has slowly died discussing this topic, which has been more concerning more than anything.
Sure.
So once again, thank you for being here. And the first thing I want to start off with is, does your statement from early December still stand, or have you changed it?
I've not wavered, not one bit. I've dug my heels into the sand, and I stick by my statement firmly. And thank you for allowing me on your show. I appreciate it.
Of course. So because today is the 13th and you were on the PBD podcast, you said some things in regards to the possible situation. Can you give us just a rough breakdown of what is going on, what you said in that video, and what you've spoken on some other podcasts and PBD, and what we are going towards based on the information that you've heard allegedly?
Yeah, and you'll have to forgive me, but I'll be a little slow in my delivery. And the reason why is because there's some information that I just can't share, right? So I do not have any classified information, so I don't want to overstate, my position. But, when I saw these elected officials out there discussing, drones coming up out of the water and off of an Iranian, off of an Iranian flagship, and Chinese operatives flying Chinese drones, and these are our elected officials that are out there saying this, and that their intel is stating the above. I just thought, oh my God, I've got to say something, and I wanted to make sure that people understood from a technical point of view that this stuff is not possible. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I have been working with a couple of guys for quite some time try to keep a nuclear warhead from coming into the United States. Back in the 80s and the 90s, when Reagan was dismantling the nuclear program between Russia, Soviet Union, and the United States, there were 132 of these that had come up missing. And that's not a joke. And you can actually Google the report. There was a guy by the name of General Lebedj or Lebed. I think the Russians, they pronounce it Lebedj. But anyway, this Russian general was the one who kind of was one of the original, whistleblowers on this situation, and he was, he was assassinated, just shortly after he had blown the whistle on this. Since that time, there have been multitudes of these nuclear warheads that are suitcase-sized warheads that have been recovered, and I think we're around 6 or 7 left that are unaccounted for in the world now. So the gentleman that I was working with was physically in the room with one of these, and he knew that particular asset was heading in this direction. And I can't discuss on the open air whose fingerprints are on this thing, but it is definitely one of our adversaries that was planning on sending this over in our direction. And, time had passed and we never knew if it was on its way over here, but recent indications have shown that it's on its way over here to possibly disrupt J20. So that's a very bombastic statement, and it's a huge statement. So when we were working with Pat with PBD, I wasn't going to give him, or I wasn't going to give any of my sources to anybody. And Sean Ryan was going to have us on his show, and for whatever reason that didn't work out. But at the time, I couldn't divulge any information based on the gentleman that I've been working with. So, but we had done a show with Patrick, and just an amazing individual and just an amazing bunch of guys. And I trusted him. And at that time, after Sean had stated that we couldn't do the show if I couldn't give up my source on his show, during that transition period, things had happened, and we had seen that the response from those that needed to know in the White House, there was just not that good of a response. And we needed something bigger and better because, time's ticking, right? No pun intended. So, I called up Pat and I said, "Look, I'm gonna have my guy come down and visit with you, and if you guys want to do a show, that's fine." So, after several hours of discussing this with JB, that's what we call the guy, JB. They decided to go ahead and do the show. We did record the show, but during that transitional period, we had then gotten some information over to the 47 camp, and the 47 camp had basically said, "Hey, pump the brakes. Let's not air this show right now." So that is where we are now. So the information that we have has been turned over to those that need to know.
Got it. So that interview with PBD has taken place, but it's not going to be released, and possibly until after the 47th camp, the inauguration takes place and all that.
I don't know.
That's
up to Pat and to JB.
Yeah, and I'm joined today also with Jim, by the way. Jim is co-hosting this, Jim McNamara.
I see his shoulder.
Yeah, you see this shoulder right there. He knows a bit or two about this. He's been following it, and we are New Jersey residents. So for those who don't know, I've done a series so far on the New Jersey drones, and we've been seeing them firsthand. So I know Jim has a few questions, but just so people know who this is.
Yeah, so that was what you were just talking about, John, that PBD broadcast. was the one that I happened to watch just a few days before we talked, and caught your name on there, and was very, very intrigued with the story that Patrick Bet-David was telling. And he said that he was going to hold back this video. He was 80% sure he was not going to release it yet. Now, I did have a couple of questions, things you touched on. When you said that this is just not possible, you're not talking about that the drones are not possible. You're talking about them flying from an offshore location is not possible. Is that correct?
Well, drones can fly from an offshore location. But what is not possible is for us to not know that there's a submarine or some type of vessel. If you look at marinetraffic.com, you can go to marine traffic and look at every single vessel that's in the ocean. They're all like airplanes, they have responders, right? So or transponders, so they have to transmit. And I was a part of a bunch of an industry, I guess you could say, of folks that have laid submarine cables, fiber optic cables around the world. So these submarine cables, when I used to pilot submersible vehicles, we used to go in, they would lay the pipeline or the pipelines or the cables, and then we'd come in and bury them. So ships don't drag anchors over the top of them. So there are all sorts of detection systems out in the water that can detect submarines. And if there was I can't even say it with a straight face, but if there's an Iranian submarine out there that's surfacing and launching drones, we would know about it.
Iran launched a mothership probably about a month ago that contains these drones. That mothership is off, I'm going to tell you the deal. It's off the east coast of the United States of America.
And that was the another New Jersey connection. That was Representative Drew from New Jersey, who was the one who came out and said, oh yeah, these are coming out of submarines. And that's what caught your attention initially. Right?
Yes, that's true. But then also there's other issues like these aircraft, there's just some things that on this planet that you just can't overcome. And that's that you cannot charge faster than you discharge. So these aircraft, whether they're multicopters or fixed wing, if they're multicopters, they can't vertically take off and then fly out for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours because they're heavy. And you have, fuel weighs anywhere from 6 to 7 pounds a gallon. Right. And if you're going to fly for 10, 15, 20 hours, you need a massive fuel tank, but you get to a point where you don't have enough power to lift the weight of the fuel tank. Then you got to put a sensor on it, which is going to be pretty heavy, So in a multi-copter type of an aircraft, you just can't do that. And there is most definitely, I've never seen it, but I firmly do believe that there is anti-gravity type aircraft out there, but I just don't know what planet it's on. But it's not this one.
Well, and the reason that's a relevant point, Alessi and I have seen a lot of these drones right outside from where we're sitting now. And we're in very close proximity to an airport, a small kind of corporate airport that Trump actually flies in and out of all the time when he comes to Bedminster. Mm-hmm. So we know that's, as all FAA airports, they're monitoring all that traffic, and this one especially. So when the drones are flying and we see no aircraft, that was our first alarm that something's off here. But it's relevant because there's been a lot of dismissal from experts that, these are not drones, you're just seeing planes in the sky. And so I think it's kind of relevant to our discussion to say, well, there's these rotocopter drones, but there's also drones, some that you built, custom built, that are more like plane type of an apparatus, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The multicopters, you have to understand that you've got 4, 6, or 8 electric motors that are lifting this aircraft off the ground. and we have 14.7 pounds on us. That is what we call gravity, right? And then as you ascend, the weight becomes more dense, right? So it's harder to keep these aircraft up in the air, just based off of battery power. But then you can go to gas power, and then you can get more flight time out of that, 60, 80, 90 minutes, maybe 120 minutes. So those are the physics that are involved with keeping an aircraft in the air. Now, there is an opportunity or a possibility of a tethered type drone. So you can take an electric motor multicopter, and you can lift it up and you can tether it, and your power will come from the ground, and you can keep that thing up there for days, right? But they're tethered, right?
Yeah.
So now
Explain that a little bit further for just the layman. Tethered being what exactly?
You have a ground-based battery system or a generator, and you have a tether that goes up to the drone, and the drone is receiving its power from the ground. So you can continuously power the drone, but then you're going to increase wear and tear on your motor. So there's a difference. Electric motor is different than a fuel engine, right? So you have fuel down at the bottom, and that is generating electricity to the aircraft, where the aircraft is utilizing electricity to power itself. Okay, we do have hybrid systems where you can use a gas engine to power electric motors in the air, but you're only going to get 90 to 120 minutes of flight time out of that, depending on the weight and everything. So there are those possibilities. The fixed wing aircraft require much less power and energy to keep it in the air, just like a regular airplane. So we can do 18, 20 plus hours on our aircraft, right? So there are aircraft out there that fly for a couple of days, but they have to fly like a regular aircraft. So again, if anything, if people are seeing these drones that are just stabilized in one spot for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, then they would have to be utilizing some form of ground-based powered system, right?
Yeah, so this is where I want to emphasize that for those who are listening, the fact that drones today are capable of 18 to 20 hours. That on your website it says 18, but we spoke before and you said it's more like 20 hours up in the air. Yes. And I think most people, when they think of drones, and you hear a lot of the people who are commenting on this who say the drones things aren't even happening, which is hilarious to think about when hundreds of thousands of people are seeing it, that they said they're just planes. It's that, no, drones are capable of this. We've reached that level of technology. People think of the DG 4-prong drone that can only be up there for like an hour and they're just videoing or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, there's advanced drones that are capable of this length of time. And the one thing I want you to go into that I've not heard you say before our conversation is this detection, being able to, the way you describe it, being able to drop like an ink on like a Pepsi, and the systems in place that they can do to monitor. Because that to me blew my mind. I was thinking about that all night after we spoke, because I was like, we are capable of doing that? Like, get out.
Yeah. The drones, the multicopter style drones, again, they require a lot of power. But anytime you do anything to a drone or to an aircraft, you always get penalties, right? There's always a penalty. So that penalty, because aircraft are designed optimally to perform. And then if you change it in any way, you're going to get a penalty. And that is most typically always flight duration or distance, right? So we can't escape that simple fact.
Right.
So, but as far as the ink that I was referring to, is not a new technology. It's an older technology, but still very ominous.
That's even wild to hear. That if that's old technology, people have no idea what we're capable of.
Yeah. Well, this ink can be placed on your skin. It can be placed on your currency. I don't know, voter ballots or something crazy like that. Your tanks, your jets, your cars. and it has a unique identifier on it, and we can, with a special sensor, we can see you. And so if we put this ink on you, like a permanent or temporary tattoo or whatever, or on your currency, we can put the unique identifier on the currency, so we know exactly how much money you have with you at all times. We can follow you. We can pick you out from a crowd, and with that unique identifier, then we can have a whole database on you. So you could be in a crowd of 1 million people, and we can pick you out of those 1 million people. We'll know your social security number, your date of birth, your bank account numbers. We'll know where you've traveled. We'll know your passport number. We'll know if you're married. We'll know if you have kids. I mean, there's no end to it, right? So this is stuff that is out there.
I'm curious. I spent 25 years in the telecom industry around the use of cell phone data for identification and usage patterns. I'll put it that way. And so I know what that's capable of. And a lot of cell-based RFID tagging so the ink has to be somewhere within that spectrum of RFID tags, magnetic. It's something along those lines, I assume.
Yeah. And we were looking at I don't know if I should say this or not, but we were looking at putting this ink on certain people down south, so that if they were kidnapped, we would have the ability to find them, right? So it works, in a good way, but yeah, all of that coupled with cell phone technology, all of that plays, hand in hand.
Okay, and then another thing I wanted to go into for just the people that are seeing these drones, because I had a video that did a million views on Instagram and a couple million across platforms.
It's calculated. Every single minute and 18 seconds, there's one from there that goes there. And then every fifth one will come straight down the street right over the house.
And what are the neighbors saying? Because you're obviously in a residential area, your neighbors are literally right next to you. Have you talked to any of the neighbors?
Yeah, so especially our next door neighbor, I know that she's very frightened. One of my other friends, he has reached out to me through Facebook that he's starting to get really scared. He's reported it multiple times to the FBI, called the local PD. The local PD saw his videos, and they're actually really kind of concerned based on his videos on how large they are. And he said that they essentially don't have any answers. I've reached out to the FBI now twice myself.
Where this lady was describing seeing the drones coming every minute, 18 seconds as a pattern. And it was a set pattern. She's like, they're literally coming, going the same direction, same movement, one after the other, popping up. And for people, they were saying why don't these drones, if they're spread out, why are they following some sort of pattern? And then the other thing is, if we could just find the origin, if they're coming from a base, why don't we just find the single location? Everyone thinks they just need to find the base it's coming from or the place that it could be located in New Jersey. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was another thing we spoke about where it made a lot more sense once you explained it.
Yeah, if you could go to the internet and you can download either Mission Planner or Google, not Google, Q Ground Control, and it's just an open source software that is pretty good. It's very inexpensive. Well, it's free software, but and you can tie that to your aircraft. And you can plan missions, you can do mapping missions, and these aircraft are on an autonomous mission. That means that you plug in the route, the height, the speed, the turning radius, and every facet of that particular mission you can plug into the flight planning software, right? And so these things are you just plug in the mission and let them go, and they'll just go do their job. And you can fly multiple aircraft on with just one pilot. I mean, you've seen the Super Bowl shows where they have all these hundreds or thousands of drones. They're all using that's just swarming technology that's been out there for quite some time and is very well perfected. Not maybe perfected, but very efficient. So you can fly these drones without even touching them, and you can fly multiples with just one pilot. So they are absolutely on a certain mission to go to certain waypoints at a certain speed for a certain reason. And why would they be out there doing this? Because they're looking for something. And if you think about it, I'm doubling down on my whole theory about they're looking for maybe some form of gas or some form of radioactive material. I double down on that because you would fly at night because the wind isn't as aggressive. And remember, I was telling you earlier that you get a penalty for everything that you do for the drone. So the barometric pressure, the wind, rain, all of those factors, they eat at your flight duration or your flight characteristics. So wind is more aggressive typically during the day. So you would fly at night to get a more accurate reading because these sensors aren't smelling a smell like something you would smell with your nose. I just use that as just kind of a way of explaining it in layman's terms. They're not looking for something visible because you're not going to see it. They are sensing parts per million, some form of gas. And, some of the assholes out there have said you can't use drones for sniffing radioactive material. Well, yeah, bullshit, because we do, and we have since the 60s. So Teledyne has a sensor called the MOVE, M-U-V-E. You can look it up on Teledyne's website. It's a radiation detection system. You can look for that. We have methane gas detection systems, and we're measuring parts per million. So we can find mass graves that are off-gassing methane left over from World War II. Right. So when we're talking about parts per million, we're talking literally parts per million. Right. So if a radioactive substance is not shielded well, then you can detect it. And I firmly believe that they're out there pissing off the world flying these things. What in your mind would be so important that they're willing to piss off the world to go fly these drones? Yeah. What is more important than pissing off the world? Well, what could be more important is something that could be cataclysmic. I mean, do the math, right?
Right.
So you guys tell me, your audience tell me, what would be more important than pissing off the world than going and trying to find something that could, kill hundreds of thousands of people,
Well, a couple of things that came to my mind. One of the things that the public could be easily confused about, and then it would be their concerns, is that most people's concepts of a drone is the hobby drone, and I've got a joystick. And so I'm assuming if I walk out in the backyard here and I see 12 drones, that there's some guy with a joystick or 12 guys with a joystick somewhere. And then you're seeing this pattern and so you're confused because you're not familiar with the technology you're actually seeing. You're thinking it's a different technology, right? Or as you were saying, flying from offshore, et cetera. A lot of this comes, and this is where your expertise is so helpful, a lot of it comes from the understanding of the technology, the understanding of the aerodynamics and aeronautics, where you're talking about a penalty. It's a trade-off. It's a performance penalty. And so if you take a public, even the sniffing thing that you were talking about, virtually everybody who's listening to this has a radon detector in their basement.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't smell it. I can't see it. I don't even know if the guy who's selling me the radon detector, if it's doing anything, right? Because maybe
we have one.
I've been living here 10 years and it's never gone off. So
Yeah.
maybe I wasted my $40. But all of this comes into play because there's a certain, for lack of a better term, a certain ignorance on the public's part about what I'm observing in my backyard when it's flying around here. Mm-hmm. But to your point, if you start sort of adding up the logic, oh, wait a minute, when I see all these drones, there's no planes flying. I know the FAA knows when there are planes flying. I know the FAA is part of the government. So I can connect the dots logically, right?
Yeah.
You get some expertise from yourself, and it leads to the conclusion that you've stated is, well, all these drones are searching for something, and the risk they're taking to shutting down flights, pissing off the public, etc., is because the risk they're searching for is greater.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to come back to that for a second. You mentioned that these were, I think you called them suitcase nukes. So I assume that's the size that they're, right? We just think of nukes as giant rocket.
Little boy.
Right?
It's the really important part in the tip.
Right. So we're thinking, wait a minute, there's 6 of these. How would somebody move that around?
Yeah.
Right. Again, the ignorance of the technology.
In a suitcase.
Right. So that's what I was thinking. So if someone's trying to sneak this into a stadium, into an inauguration, how easy is that? Maybe that's out of your expertise, but how easy is this to transport around and get place to place?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And what I'll do is I'll go to the beginning of your statements. As far as somebody controlling an aircraft with a remote control, like a little joystick thing. Yes, that is very true. But if these are military grade unmanned systems, which we know they are, they're not typically using a joystick, right? They're using that software. And what happens is I'll use my hands here. So you'll have a base station where they're flying, and they'll have an elevated antenna. Okay, because for those of you that believe the Earth is round, you have line of sight issues. So if you fly an aircraft around a building or something, you'll lose signal. And if you go out 20 plus 30, 40, 50 miles, there's this thing called the curvature of the Earth that may not work for the flat Earth type people.
Right.
I can't even say it with a straight face, but anyway, so you have the Earth is curved like this, right? So you have to elevate that antenna so you can get long distances. And so it takes a lot of energy to go from the base to over here, which could be 5 miles, 20 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles, right? And you have to fly at a high altitude because you have that line of sight with the communications. If you don't have that, then you're going to lose your aircraft. You're going to lose comms with your aircraft, and the aircraft is going to go, oh, hey, there's nobody talking to me, so I'm going to turn around and fly back home, right?
Right.
So the other thing that we do is we can take the base station here, right here, and we can fly an aircraft at 1,000 feet altitude, and we can relay that signal from here over here to this one. So that way you don't ever lose that communications, right? So that's called a mesh network, and you see mesh networks everywhere and you just don't even know it, right? So that's how you would fly an aircraft at long distances, and not lose comms. But that also means that, drones are not allowed to fly over 400 feet. You can't do that unless you have a level of permission from the FAA, right? So the FAA has a rough job of keeping the air nice and safe, right? And so anybody that flies aircraft over 400 feet has to have permission. It doesn't matter if you're the military or, Joe Blow down the street, you have to have permission to fly over 400 feet. So if you're flying in commercial airspace, the military, they can do what they want on their military bases. And that's just that, they have certain authorizations. and that's just what they do, right? But if you're going to fly in a area such as New Jersey, New York type area, you absolutely have to have permission. So the FAA knows about it, the administration knows about it, everybody knows about it. They're just not telling you. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
now going into the nuclear warhead situation, this administration has smuggled in over 40 million illegals since 2020, right? I know the news says, 10, 15, 20, but no, the actual answer is over 40, right? The size of Poland has been brought into the United States illegally, right? So those are the real numbers, and I can guarantee you those are the real numbers, right? I work on the border, so I know what is happening. So if we can smuggle in 40 million plus illegal and hundreds and thousands of terrorists, people who hate this country and want to do nothing but bad things for our country, we can smuggle in suitcases.
Wow. So
Right.
going now into that, what comes next after this? Because I think we've laid the groundwork of what these drones are capable of. Obviously, your background, you have a company, you work with clients like Raytheon and whatever, other private contracts like that. So that should, if people question your credibility, they should just go look into that. But now with the impending situation of they're searching for something, it still, quote unquote, hasn't been found because we're here in New Jersey. We still see the drones out. If the drones had stopped and we didn't see them anymore, I think we'd kind of be like, all right, they probably found what they were looking for. Has the intensity come down? Yes. They're not as many as the first couple weeks in December, but they're still there. But now when we talk about what is to come, there's some significant events, and I want you to lay the work into this as to what you think is possibly being orchestrated and what the people should be aware of.
Okay, yeah. Let me back up just 1 second. When I said there are over 40 million illegals that have been brought into the United States, there's one thing that I want everybody to be aware of. And I hope like hell this statement goes viral, like my first and only ever video on TikTok did.
TikTok of all places too.
Yeah. So, the Chinese have been smuggling in weapons, containers full of weapons and fully automatic weapons and ammo, small arms, right? They've been doing that since 2020, right? And that has been validated to me by some of the most highest levels of the government, right? And so people do not know this fact that countless weapons and countless, lots of ammunition have been brought in through shipping containers and is distributed all across the United States. That's absolutely fact. And I've had some of the most highest levels of intel. People go, how the hell do you know that? Well, I can't tell you how I know that. I'm sorry, but it's a fact. So, what is it for? I can only speculate what all of this stuff is for. But I know that weapons and ammunition are not brought in for anything good, right? And as far as the nuclear warheads, again, it was my speculation and the other two gentlemen that I have been working with on this, JB, the principal, the guy who was actually in the room with the suitcase-sized nuke, he clearly understood that it was over here to disrupt the inauguration. So if you remember Dan Bongino, he's going to be heading up the Secret Service.
Right.
Dan had released a statement a couple of days ago saying that, the Secret Service just isn't up to par right now. Right. And I hope to God that, President Trump would watch this video, but I would highly suggest that, he takes the Secret Service and he does something with them before the inauguration. So if it were me and I were the president and I had this type of situation, I would have private contractors with every single Secret Service agent that is working this event. Not one Secret Service agent would be allowed to wander without a private contractor that is loyal and faithful to the new president, because they have proven that there are some within the Secret Service who do not have 47's best interest at heart, right? So either you need to put them in timeout for a while until Dan can get them sorted, or you place a private contractor that and has personally been vetted to be with these agents, because the deep state actors, they know that if President Trump gets in, if he walks in that office in the White House, there's going to be a lot of them that are going to go to jail, and they won't stop at anything to ensure that doesn't happen, as we've seen. I mean, Ray Charles could see this, right? So
I've seen, I saw a podcast, I don't remember whose podcast it was on, but Tim Kennedy, you may be familiar with who he is, but Tim Kennedy was talking at length about this exact subject, and the need for private military contractors, either to augment or replace in whole the security around the president. So that said, and I think it's a valid point, and I've heard it discussed a lot, even to the point that they should move the inauguration inside, get away from large crowds, etc. One of the things that's interesting to me that I haven't heard mentioned is other mass gatherings, because everyone keeps pointing to the inauguration, and clearly that would be if somebody had nefarious intentions, that would sort of be the biggest prize. But if terrorists, let's say, just wanted to make a symbolic strike, and this could also be used for that, similar to World Trade, you've got the National Football Championship happening the same night as the inauguration. You've got the Super Bowl coming up. You've got other things like this which could be also target events, which I don't hear people mentioning too much. But talk to us a little bit around, beyond what you've shared and what JB was sharing with you. Are there any other indications or any additional information that you've received that you could share as to, targets, any background on the inauguration versus, let's say, one of the bowl games?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One thing that we have been, how do I say this? We have understood that there is a extreme high potential that there is another weapon in Ukraine right now that is being serviced and is possibly heading to Russia. And and this is one of my favorite sayings right now, just do the math, right? If you do the math, we've been in Ukraine and sending them hundreds of billions of dollars for them to go fight their war. And what is that war accomplishing? Well, there's one theory that I believe in, is that we have been shoring up the Ukraine to diminish Russia's ability to fight. We're draining their assets to the point where they've got to go get North Koreans who haven't fought a war in over 70 years to come out and be cannon fodder for the Russians.
Oh, that's a good theory.
So we have been constantly depleting Russia's ability to fight a big fight, like the United States, for a couple of years now. right? So how great would it be for the deep state operatives to have a nuclear warhead detonated in Red Square and a nuclear warhead detonated in the United States? And, by measuring the isotopes and all the smart stuff that they do, they can track where those nuclear warheads originated from.
Right.
And it shows Soviet Union, or now Russia. That would give the American people the anger and the motivation to rally around the United States and NATO to go fight the last stronghold of anti-globalists, which is Putin, right? They got to get Putin out of there because he's not a globalist, and they want this globalist, utopia, right? So let's use these nuclear warheads to piss off the Americans and NATO, saying that, hey, Russia planted those. Let's go break it off in their ass. And now that they're so far depleted that it wouldn't be as big of a fight as if we were to just go toe to toe with them without having to, endure the fight of the Ukrainians for the past 2 years, right? So think about it. If the American people, you kill 100,000 American people, or more, and you say the Soviet Union did this or Russia did this, the American people are going to rally, and they're going to say, let's go kick their ass. And there you go. And now we've got World War III, right? So
Is there, so it's a great point, because obviously if you said, so just assuming, sort of one of Lincoln's favorite ways to argue, it's like, okay, I absolutely agree there's a nuclear weapon. It's been smuggled into the United States. It's a given. Everybody, might
not just
say,
one.
So then the question is, well, by who, for what purpose, right? Well, is it rational to say terrorists would do that, to just have a terrorist attack in the U.S.? Sure, that's kind of reasonable, rational. It's not like it hasn't been done before. Some deep state thing within the U.S. Well, at this point, who wouldn't believe, a nefarious deep state plot? A military from another country, that's reasonable. So who might be behind this could be assigned to 3 or 4 different people and reasonably agreed to. And you might not be able to share this, or you might not have information on it. Do you have any sense or any information you could share that it's one or the other of those? Terrorist, another country, deep state? Maybe you just have some thoughts. Maybe it's not something you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I don't think I can fully answer that question, just simply because of the what we're working on right now. But I can tell you it's not Russia.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I can't answer that fully, but
no, fair enough. I mean, I didn't necessarily think you had a straightforward answer, but probably, in part just for the viewers to say, if you connect the dots on the drones, the other thing, and say, yeah, it's believable that there's some plot afoot, well, then there could be multiple players behind it.
There is a plot afoot.
Yeah, and at least to the public, I don't think it's a stretch to the public to say something's not quite kosher here.
Yeah.
But the who behind it is up for debate or discussion, and that's why I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry I can't fully answer that, but we know, based on the motivation of those that have their fingerprints on this thing, which I can't say. I can tell you that it was headed over to Iran. I can tell you that at one point. But we know that those who have their fingerprints on this, their intent is absolutely to light this thing off here in the United States.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning too that on the Sean Ryan podcast, again, these are alleged claims, I want to say, just for those, is that this lady, CIA analyst, Sarah Adams, she's reported on saying there's over 1,000 Al-Qaeda like Navy SEAL trained that have entered the border. They have the Iranian anti-missile weaponry that's already here, and that she believes that there's a coordinated effort from her enemies, possibly China, Al-Qaeda, Iran, working together to, and she says in 2025 there'll be an embassy attack, there'll be 4 countries in Europe being attacked, and there could be some symbolic attack in the US based on Al-Qaeda, what they're known for. They don't do just attacks in, no offense, in Kansas out there. They're going to do attack somewhere in a very, monumental, significant event like happened in 9/11. So she has reported on this and she's put it out there, and everything that's come to transpire with the open border, what's happened, and I've spoken to some people on the border, how so many military-age Chinese individuals have come across.
Right.
You look at a map of the U.S. and you see Chinese-bought land. So much of that land is next to military bases.
Yeah.
Like you said, your quote, do the math. It really does seem we're hitting a big point.
For sure. And, I saw that was a great interview that Sean Ryan had done with Sarah. And I believe that she was being conservative when she said 1,000. I think there's a lot more than that. And that's not me disagreeing with her. I'm absolutely agreeing with her. She would know better than me, right? So, but I can tell you that I've done work down on the border and south of the border for years. And I have flown over training camps that don't exist. And I know that these people are into this country. We would go and work on the border to try to stop these. We're working with law enforcement, and 90+% of the people that we were apprehending were all fighting age males. And I know you've heard that term on the news and on YouTube, and it's the truth. I mean, why the hell would you bring just fighting age males into the United States? They're not the advanced party for the family, right? And you can't say, well, they want to go set up and work so they can, raise money to send back to their families and their country. No, they're here for a reason. And wait, let's do the math. All of these weapons and stuff that have been distributed into the United States, all of the fighting age males, do you guys realize that there's enough carfentanil in this country to kill every man, woman, and child on the planet 10 times over? That's not saturating the market. That's a purpose, right? So you have all of these fighting age males that have come over. You have these people that they just don't like us. A lot of these Chinese operatives are over. We have, secret Chinese police over here policing their own people. We have all of this fentanyl. They're putting fentanyl on dollar bills and, currency, child's playground equipment. There's more people dying of fentanyl now than ever. There's I've been fighting child trafficking for years. It's the largest commodity imported into the United States over oil. I mean, all of this stuff. They're laundering money through child trafficking, and all of this stuff is just absolute pure evil. And I vow to fight to the death to make sure that myself, my family, and the men and women of this country, are protected. And I have a little bit of a platform now because of that viral video. So if there's anything that I can do, I can just prove to Americans, it doesn't matter who you are, you can fight this and you can make a difference, because our livelihood depends on this. So everybody in America who loves this country is a warrior for the United States, but a warrior for God, because this is absolutely pure evil, and evil is winning, right? So now President Trump, whether you like him or not, doesn't matter, don't care, right? But President Trump, at least President Trump coming in 2025, is going to be able to kind of rewrite the ship just a little bit, right? At the very least, he wants religious freedom in America. So it's very important that he gets in that office and that he stays alive, because our religious freedom depends on that, because he's the only one that has the ability to fight for our religious freedoms. And if he can't do it, then guess what? That means we have to. It goes back down to us. But this is absolute pure evil. And, I have always said that I'm one of God's warriors. And I'm gonna fight for what I believe in. I'm gonna fight for my family. I'm gonna fight for everybody that loves this country. So, I don't want to sound like a politician, but all of the politicians that are in the United States, and it doesn't matter if it's the city councils up to mayors to to the House and the Senate in DC, all of these people that have been paid for, they've accepted the money. They're on borrowed time. And this is going to be a pivotal moment in our history where, people like me and people like you who just love this country, we're going to go in there and we're going to take out the garbage. It's that time. We're on the precipice, and we're either going to go to or we're going to fight and we're going to win. So yeah, I'm standing first in line to go fight the evil, and I've spent a lot of years on the ground fighting it on the ground. Now I believe that I'm in a position to where I need to go fight this evil through legislation. So I'm going to run for office in 26.
Well, John, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. I feel like you dropped so many nuggets here, and I think, like we've been saying, there's this impending thing happening, but at least now, knowing your expertise, your background, there's more clarity to the situation, and hopefully, the powers that be may speak of what actually is happening and that people don't forget. And that's why I wanted to do this, is to not forget that this is still happening here in New Jersey and possibly other parts of the U.S., and that, it seems like it is teaming to something. So thank you again, John. Really appreciate it.
Great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. You guys are so welcome, and thank you for everything that you guys are doing. And just please tell your audience that when President Trump makes it and he's able to speak on the drones, I want people to understand that there's only so much that he's going to be able to say. Maybe he'll be able to just say exactly what they're doing, and that's absolutely fact. But I would like for people to just understand that there might be reasons why he can't say 100% of all of the whole purpose for these unmanned systems out there flying. So just be patient with him, right? So
Absolutely.
Cheers. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, gentlemen.